Okay, so my topic is the IKUF Association and Yiddish culture in Romania. It's part of my dissertation. So right now I'm a PhD student. I study IKUF, which is the newspaper they published. And this is part of my dissertation for my MSc in Yiddish culture at Oxford University that I finished in 2015. It's a little part of it. It's sort of like an X-ray of what they were doing with Yiddish culture and what it looked like in Romania. So before I begin, however, I think I should perhaps provide you with some introductory background details about Romanian Jewry and about Romania in general. So first of all, the date of the 23rd of August, 1944 is very important in Romanian history because it's the date of the coup d'etat, and it marks the end of Ion Antonescu's fascist regime, the beginning of communism through the abdication of King Michael I. And for the Romanian Jewry, what the situation was like for them in this period. I've chosen to put up a few numbers so you can get the picture of what the Holocaust meant for the Romanian Jewish community. As you can see, there were close to 800,000 Jews living in Romania in 1930, and then by 1945, this number had dropped to 375,000, which later went up a little bit after the return of some of the displaced persons. In terms of leadership and how the community was managed, the Communist Party founded the Jewish Democratic Committee, Comitetul Democratic Evresc, so CDE, in Romanian abbreviation, and they were promoting communist values within the Jewish community through culture, society, and mainly anti-Aliyah propaganda and anti-Zionist propaganda. Now that I've given you sort of this background knowledge of what was happening in Romania at that time, I'm going to talk about the IKUF Association. You might have heard of it in the context of New York. They've done a lot after the war in New York. It was first mentioned after a conference in Paris in 1937, and I haven't been able to find many records about what was happening before the war with the IKUF Association in Romania, but I know they restarted their activity under the CDE, so under the communist regime after 1944. And its activities were meant to promote Yiddish, both as an alternative to Hebrew and as the language of the new working class. I have found sort of a draft of their plans. It wasn't directly their plans per se, which is quite strange. It was the plans of an association called Friends of Yiddish that was sort of under IKUF. And they said that what they wanted to do was create Yiddish press and a Yiddish publishing company. They wanted schools that would teach Yiddish. They wanted to add the language to the curricula of existing Jewish schools, theater and performances in Yiddish, and Yiddish libraries. This was in part materialized, at least until 1953, when the CDE and IKUF ceased their activity. And if you allow me, I'll quote one of the very few scholars who sort of wrote and researched this period, who says that Jewish cultural activity now, so in the period between 1944 and 1953, was limited to 2 theaters and a number of youth clubs, art groups, and musical societies. These were all associated with the cultural organization IKUF, which was under complete communist control. So they were trying to do all of this, but of course it was all marked with propaganda and anti-Zionism. Now, one of their most notable efforts was IKUF, which is what I'm studying now for my PhD from sort of a more linguistic perspective. IKUF sort of subtitled itself a social and literary journal issued by a committee, the committee being the Jewish Democratic Committee. It was published between 1944 and 1953. It appeared at first twice a month, and then it appeared weekly, and it was reported that it had a circulation of about 4,200 issues, and I think these were sent throughout Romania, although I haven't sort of found clear records of this. Besides articles promoting communism, IKUF published poems and short fiction from authors such as Jakob Friedman or Jakob Sternberg, sometimes translations from important writers, either Romanian or very famous writers that were being read at the time. They also published reviews of plays at the Jewish theater. However, one of the main characteristics of the political discourse in the journal was anti-Zionism, especially at the beginning of the 1950s. Yet it wasn't the only communist idea. They were sort of they had special issues for the 1st of May and for the 23rd of August, which had now become Romania's national day. And they were sort of condemning the Holocaust, they call it the Holocaust, fascists and the former government. And so besides this newspaper, what they did, this is a sample, I forgot I put that there. This is an article about Shalom Aleichem, if you can read Hebrew, an anniversary article, and it was published on the first page. So although they had little snippets of like politics, a little, and communist discourse, they also really put a lot of emphasis on personalities, on Yiddish culture, on promoting what authors like Shalom Aleichem or theater and classics of Yiddish culture. So again, I mentioned IKUF Blätter, and I'm going to mention the theater because there are a lot of people who claim that the first Yiddish theater appeared in Romania in 1876 in Iași. So there is this national sort of consciousness about Yiddish theater and Romania being the home of Yiddish theater. Except for the fascists, that period was a really sad one for the Yiddish theater. And after 1944, there was this renewal through the effort of the IKUF Association. So they founded the IKUF Theater in 1945. The first play was a play called IKUF by Moishe Pinchevsky. That was about the resistance movement organized by inmates of a fascist concentration camp. And then it continued, organizing productions of Shalom Aleichem, Stevi the Milchiker, Peretz's The Kishufmacherin, The Witch. And sadly, it had to endure a lot of hardships in that period, because although the plays were successful, not a lot of money was made, and it was hard to pay the actors, so they needed outside support. It received it towards the end of 1947 from the Ministry of Culture, together with the Federation of Jewish Communities and the Joint Distribution Committee. And by August the 1st, 1948, the Jewish State Theater was established, which still performs in Yiddish today. I actually work there. I work as a research assistant. They have a great archive for whoever wants to do work in Jewish theater. And sort of a year later, in 1949, another Jewish state theater was founded in Iași. So in terms of theater and sort of journalism, IKUF really managed to do something for Yiddish culture in Romania. However, we can not neglect that most of its propaganda was anti-Aliyah and sort of preventing Jews from going to Israel. And however, despite this propaganda, a large proportion of the Jewish population was interested in leaving. And actually, what I found funniest is that I've found reports, and granted they are oral, so there aren't actually any formal reports, of people meeting and saying that they're talking they had IKUF meetings at which they were planning to go to Israel. So they were sort of conspiring. They said, look, we're doing Yiddish, but in fact they were conspiring and planning to leave and go to Israel. But these are, again, only oral reports, people claiming that that's what happened at those meetings. Now, in conclusion, so I'm keeping this very short, this was an amazing opportunity. IKUF's work was an amazing opportunity for those who supported Yiddish culture. And despite its propagandistic sort of endeavors, I don't think that can be denied, because besides all the political discourse, again, classics such as Avram Goldfaden, Shalom Aleichem, they were promoted and they were sort of revered. And people were able to sort of speak Yiddish. Now, these activities were mainly centralized in Bucharest, but they also extended throughout the country. And I think that just by looking at the activities of the IKUF, one can gain an insight into the history of Romanian Jewry, and also into the history of Yiddish in Romania. However, you might have noticed that I only chose to speak about the theater and the newspaper, and they had many other plans, like schools, libraries. I think they had some. I found some mentions of libraries, but mainly schools. And schools were not successful because people didn't think, and I actually found a letter written in Yiddish by some students who were asking the principal to be moved to a Romanian state school because they didn't see the relevance of learning Yiddish in school. So while Yiddish seemed like a great alternative, sorry, I'm losing my voice, for entertainment, it didn't seem to be like the choice for, at least for young people and for people in general, as a practicality, which is similar to what Gennady Streich describes of what was happening here. I mean, in all the Soviet countries, actually, and all the communist countries. Because they did want to read literature and they did want to sort of go to the theater and still hear Yiddish a little bit, but they didn't want their children to learn Yiddish. Because the two main directions, those who wanted to go to Israel, of course, wanted to learn Hebrew, and the Jews who wanted to stay in Romania were supposed to be assimilated by the state, so it was only relevant if they were only sort of useful to the state, and they could only stay if they knew Romanian and sort of completely integrate in the Romanian state. So in the end, even though, Yiddish has disappeared mostly in Romania, and most Jews actually ended up leaving during communism, and right now the situation is sort of sad. I think there are about 3 or 4 Yiddish speakers in Bucharest, maybe a bit more, and but there are documents. Those books were published. There were many more books published even after 1953. And I do think that IKUF was an important chapter in Yiddish culture in Romania. And that's it.
Thank you very much.